Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Digital Thinker webinar here with the team. I'm Alex, the Director of Sales here at Digital Thinker, and this is Victor Boddicker here as our integrations architect, aficionado, if you will. So thanks for joining us today to learn a little bit more about ION for our on-prem users, what's to expect, a few solutions in play for you. Today's webinar should be fairly straightforward. I don't expect it to really take longer than 20 to 30 minutes max, so you can get a good chunk of your day back. And again, we're happy to take questions at the end, so feel free to utilize the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll go from there. So again, thanks for joining us. Today's agenda is going to cover, what is ION? I'm sure most of you know what ION is, but let's just cover our bases, right? What is it? What does it do? And how does it work? And then we'll go into expectations. What do we know from Infor? What have they told us to expect for Infor OS for on-prem users? What options Infor has? And then we're going to talk into options that are available on the Hexagon side. So that may look like, REST APIs on the backend integrations. And then that also could look like Python Studio. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit of how to plan ahead for that next integration. And again, we'll take questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move it on over and give the floor to Victor and let him go through what he knows, and then I'll take it on the back end. So take it away, Victor.
Cool, thanks, Al. Yeah, again, thank you all for being here. I'm not sure if you're all here because you just have a love of middleware integrations or because we're all afraid of what's happening, come 2024 December, right? But to preface this, I want to say this is going to be, a 10,000-foot overview of, what ION is, what's coming up, and some possible solutions. So as Alex said, feel free to drop any questions in the chat or reach out and contact us directly. So let's jump right in, right? So what is ION? We probably all are somewhat familiar with what it is as a whole, whether or not we've used it, firsthand ourselves, or if we just know our company uses it, we're all somewhat familiar. But what ION really is a dedicated middleware created by Infor, primarily to be used with Infor products, right? So back in the day when ION was first engendered, I think the intent was to try to coerce people to have lots of products under the Infor umbrella, right? For example, Infor EAM was integrated with Infor Lawson, for example. That integration was very seamless because the way ION was designed was that it would transfer data in the form of BODs that all Infor products could understand without any translation, right? So this was directly designed to be an Infor to Infor communication channel. However, when designing this product, of course, the people at Infor were thinking, well, there's no way we can get everyone to use just Infor products. That's not feasible, right? So let's design it to also have robust integration capabilities outside of Infor. And that, has existed to this day. And I remember fondly 4 years ago, my first integration was doing that exact thing, right? Integrating EAM with CIS, right? A non-Infor product. So it is still doable, right? It just required a lot more customization and technical know-how, which is generally where I would jump in. So that's what ION is as a whole. And as we all know, it's about to be phased out. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. When EAM was purchased roughly 1 or 2 years ago by Hexagon, this is the first thing that popped into my mind as the integration specialist, right? Is what's going to happen? Because prior to this, Infor and EAM talk directly to each other. And should something go awry, you then contact just Infor and they fix it for you. Now, since then, the products have started to grow farther and farther apart as they're being maintained by two separate companies. We always sort of knew this would happen, right? I remember having a conversation 1 or 2 years ago with a rep from Hexagon. He said, we're not going to try to break the communication with ION, wink, but you might want to expect to try to get off it at some point in the future. And now we're pretty much at that stage, right? So it's official. ION for on-prem users is being deprecated. Now, why is that? Well, simply enough, it's at the end of its life cycle, right? Like a lot of softwares, especially prior to the big cloud era that we are experiencing now, software is designed to have a certain life cycle. The dependent softwares that ION relies on are reaching the end of their own life cycle, right? And those are listed here, like .NET, just the versions of Windows and a litany of other softwares. They're reaching the end of their life cycle, and Infor is deemed it's not worth it to them to do a big replacement of these softwares in ION, and rather they just say, hey, get off of ION, switch to a new product, right? So come end of 2024, ION is officially entering sustainment mode, at which point you're going to have to either switch off, or if you don't, you might have some problems, and Infor is not really going to be on the hook for it because they've given you ample time in their mind to get off it, right? So if something breaks, you might be out of luck. We've actually already experienced this, since these products are owned by different companies now. It reminds me of the Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other, right? Especially in the cloud-hosted customers, they have a problem with EAM communicating with ION, and neither side wants to take responsibility. So we're already sort of seeing that occur today, but we only expect that to get worse, especially once it's in sustainment mode come 2025. So like we've said, in their mind, they've given you ample time, and I really do believe that's true. I say don't fear, right? We have 5 months to make our changes, and we have a lot of ways to do that. So let's go ahead and dive into how we could possibly get ourselves off of ION and get away from that fear. Okay, so in my mind, you have 3 main options to take if you want to get out of the ION cloud, right? Out of the ION umbrella. Let's talk about each branch and their advantages, disadvantages, right? So first of all, we have Infor LTR. Infor LTR is essentially the replacement for ION. It is listed as sort of an upgrade to ION. They basically say it's kind of a plug and play. You don't have to go ahead and move over, your existing integrations in a long, timely process. It's pretty much just an upgrade. So that's kind of one of the main advantages there. It's sort of the cheap, relatively easy way to get off of ION, as it's kind of just upgrade in place, and you're good to go. So if you're fine staying under the Infor umbrella, that is the way to go for, a fast transition off of it if you don't think you have the time to get everything lined up prior to 2025. Of course, the disadvantage with this is just like ION, it's got a life cycle end. They've already stated it's, 2030, it's only going to be supported to. So whether or not we have this hard conversation now or in 5 years is up to you, right? But this is a conversation that's going to happen, right? With the same thing here. You're going to want to get off it at some point, whether it be now or sometime in the future prior to 2030. Another disadvantage is cost. Now, we all know, ION was not cheap. And if we want to stay under that Infor umbrella, you're going to have to pay. They've not released to us how much it's going to cost. I would hope it would not be much more than ION is as is today, but again, we don't know. I could see them upcharging for the fact that it's a newer product, right? But again, you're going to be paying more. It's going to be dying around 2030 again, and I don't think it's any more robust than ION. It probably just has those newer technologies upgraded. So that's your first option, right? That's your quick transition off of ION, is to just stick with Infor, go to LTR. That's obviously not the one here, Digital Thinker, we're pushing, right? We're pushing more so for the latter 2 branches. So the second one, right? That's going to be get off of ION completely onto one of basically 2 different options, right? That's going to be using our REST API or web services. Now, about a year or so ago, EAM Hexagon released a very robust API to use. Prior to that, you kind of had to go through ION or use the old school SOAP XML services, but now they have a new robust API that allows for integrations, right? Anybody who's familiar with APIs knows, right? It's just the REST call is pretty seamless, but it's good technology. I've only found a few bugs with it, and they've quickly remedied them, so they're very on top of it, and they want it to be a very stable platform. So how do you do that, right? There's a couple options. Now, I've done many integrations that went from EAM to ION to another middleware, then finally the target destination. If you're in one of those sort of situations using a third-party middleware such as Boomi or MuleSoft, or again, a litany of others here, that's one option, right? Take all the transformations, all the data processing, API calls happening in ION, move them over to that other third-party middleware, and basically get rid of ION completely, have the APIs be called through that third-party middleware, all the processing. Again, you just kind of talk to us if you need any help with APIs, but they're all listed on the website of EAM, right? All the APIs, the Swagger, so to speak, is what it's called. But all the documentation is there. So that's your first option, right? If you already have an in-place middleware, or you're looking to get one anyways, that's a good option, right? Just take that technology out of ION, those workflows, put them in that other middleware. Secondly, you could just do all the scripting yourself, right? And this is right. This is talking more about creating a standalone script in the language of your choice, Python, Java, whatever it should be, PowerShell if you want to do it more locally, and doing all the coding yourself, right? Um, this is this is a cheap option. That is one of the most biggest advantages here in my mind, right? This is very cheap, very low overhead. If you're going to host this stuff in the cloud, it's, you get very low overhead till you start to get, millions of calls in AWS or Azure. That's a very cheap way to go. The main disadvantage of I see of this route specifically is the separation of powers. Um, Instead of having all of your logic grouped together in a dedicated middleware like Ion or Boomi or MuleSoft, or as we'll talk about in Python Studio in the EAM itself, you have this nebulous script lying around on someone's computer, on some server, or somewhere in AWS or Azure, and it's something that's got to be maintained. And it's one of those things, and this is, I'm sure we're all very familiar, right? Well, 4 years goes down the road and hey, we want to adjust our integration or I want to move it somewhere, do something with it. And then you contact someone like me. And no one at the company that I'm talking to knows where the script is or how it works, right? Because the person that wrote it is no longer with the company. So the big disadvantage here is that when you start to separate this stuff out and have custom code running by itself, um, it's easy to get lost in translation unless you do very rigorous documentation of what's actually going on and how it works. And lastly, I think the main disadvantage here is that the flexibility on how you run it can only get so intense. It's pretty much you're going to be running this on a schedule, an interval of 10 minutes or so, or 1 minute, whatever it is. That's generally how you're going to run these standalone scripts. Besides that, you might want to use things like webhooks, but again, those have to be triggered through another middleware. I won't get too nitty gritty onto that. Again, this is high level. So scheduled is generally going to be the way this is going to work. And that can only take you so far depending on how you want to do it. But that is a cheap way to get off it, but it requires a lot of work, a lot of maintenance, and a lot of documentation to make it happen. So the third option on the next slide here is the one we're really pushing for, right? It's Python Studio. So I think it was early this year, Python Studio was released for EAM customers in the cloud. And as of May, I believe, of this year, it was released for on-prem users as well. With the caveat, you do need to be upgraded to the latest version, which I believe is 12.1 now, to have that Python Studio installed and purchased onto your local environment. So what is Python Studio? This is a great talking point. For those not familiar with Python, it's a high-level, easily readable programming language that is very, very versatile and very useful when it comes to making things like interconnected systems in the web, right? It's very good at authorization protocols, talking to many different softwares like SFTPs, even direct database connections, right? It's got all these fancy tools you can use. And the advantage of Python Studio is it's a full Python module, right? The things that I need to import libraries to make certain Python functions work. Everything that you can do in a hosted Python function that you'd write yourself, you can do within Python Studio itself. So that's really nice, right? So let's talk about some advantages and some disadvantages here. So the main disadvantage of Python Studio really is just the purchase price. I think for on-prem, I think for in the cloud it was $25K, and maybe I'll correct if I'm wrong, it's probably the same for on-prem per year. Or I believe you can buy it outright. But again, talk to Hexagon. I'm sure every price is different depending on who you talk to, right? It's sales in a nutshell. So that's the main disadvantage I see of Python over the other options is possibly the cost. But that's really not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the main advantages, right? And push us as a team and what we're doing here and what the good things are. So I've already known a few people that have done integrations with Python. I myself I'm in the late stages of integration with one of our clients with Python, so I know that it works. It's a fully fledged Python framework that you can do any sort of integration you possibly could ever want on there. So that's just obviously the first advantage, right? Full power of any sort of Python, any high-level programming language. You can do whatever you want. Now, Python within EAM itself, right, comes with some advantages. First of all, your code is maintained in the same place that EAM is, right? It's the opposite of what we talked about for the hosted functions, right? It's all contained within EAM. There's no separation of powers, no lost No lost, code somewhere out in the nebulous cloud. You know where to get it. It's literally on the EAM menu. Go click Python Studio. You can find your code in a nice little file structure in a window that pops up. So that's the main advantage, one of them. The second is it's got pre-built templates, right? Because this was designed by Hexagon for EAM, it actually comes with out-of-the-box templates that allow for easy programming and interfacing with EAM. Things like pre-built templates that show you how to retrieve an assets details, how to create a work order, or how to retrieve data from a grid, as well as other more robust ones that are things like general data processing, big data, machine learning templates. I've not used any of those myself, right? But it shows sort of the attitude that Hexagon has about this product, right? They're thinking about it in the future and how powerful it can be used. So that's really a good indicator to me that this is going to be a stable thing that they want to build on and see get better and better over time, is the fact that they're looking forward toward these big data applications and trying to build out a product that people can use for more than just integrations. They can use for a lot of fun things, right? So that's one of the main talking points there. The second big advantage it has over just a hosted script in the cloud is how it's triggered, right? So like I talked about, in the cloud, likely you'd run on an interval schedule of 10 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, right? The same thing is true with an EAM. You can run on a schedule if you want to design it like that, and that'll be through alert management. But also you can actually run it through Flex, right? This allows for some dynamic runtime where basically, for example, should a work order be set to a certain status, right? I have Flex on the archive events table that picks that up. I then insert that to the Python events table, and it runs it just like that, right? So instead of waiting 10 minutes to go say, hey, let's pick up all completed work orders and send them over to our target system, it can actually process each one individually in real time. Now, along with that real-time processing that Flex allows for is also something you could pass in called parameters, right? So in Python Studio, you have up to 10 parameters you can pass into the code that actually get fed in from the database into the Python Studio code itself. So the application here is that instead of having to make several calls, on a 10-minute interval to see what work orders need picked up and what to do with them every 10 minutes, right? And then you have to go make another call to find out each work order specific details, 4, 5, whatever it is, extra calls you need to make just to process that. You can actually pass that in directly via the Flex, right? So should I set my work order completed status? I could pass in a parameter that says the work order code is this. Here's the status. Here's who did it. Here's an email to send it to, et cetera, right? A few other fields. This allows for a much more streamlined process when it comes to the actual coding itself, making my job easier, making you pay less or your development time a lot less. So that is a huge talking point for me, is the fact that you can do it dynamically and pass in parameters just like you would real code, but it just works seamlessly with the EAM. So that's the main thing about Python Studio, right? So again, the main talking points is that, hey, ION's being deprecated come 2025. Let's talk about how to get you off it, right? We have a few options. You either go LTR, right? That's Infor's product. You want to stay under the Infor umbrella. If you want to get off Infor's bill completely, you either start talking about another middleware or separate self-maintained code, or we talk about moving it all into EAM itself and having our technology and all of our functionality host the EAM in the form of Python Studio. Or should you want to go to the cloud, you have more options like DataBridge Pro, which Alex is about to cover. But that's generally it for me and my side. Again, any more questions from me, feel free to drop in the chat while Alex is talking more high level over here.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for that, Victor. That was incredible. Incredibly knowledgeable, and very excited to share what parts of EAM are coming out. So big question that Victor did touch on, right? What are the options and how do you get into Python Studio? Well, ultimately you do need to upgrade to 12.1 and then purchase the Python Studio key from your Hexagon Direct rep. So let's talk a little bit about that. Some of you may know, upgrading to 12.1 isn't an additional licensing cost from Hexagon. The cost on your end is whoever your technical service provider, what it's going to take them to make sure we can get you upgraded, and also making sure that your hardware capabilities are meeting the standard for what 12.1 needs. So to learn more about what it's going to cost to upgrade, please reach out to myself at Digital Thinker, and we can foster a conversation between either Victor or other technical resource, Tyler Davis, to get a better understanding of what your upgrade to 12.1 is going to look like and how long it's going to take. And then lastly, maybe it's time to consider go ahead and uplifting to the cloud, and what are the benefits of that? So, benefits of being in the cloud is you're on the latest and greatest 24/7. The updates are at no additional cost to you. And if there's an issue with the hardware component or an issue with the cloud component, all of that responsibility is on Hexagon. I know it is some requirements for certain customers to stay on a locally hosted environment, and that's fine. We can still support that. We can still help that. But just know that at least for the current time being, your options are a little limited to what tools will be released moving forward. And so that brings into Data Bridge Pro. So Hexagon has, been proud to release their, I wouldn't quite call it version of a middleware, but their replacement to ION, so to speak, which is Data Bridge Pro. And I think I've heard a few people jokingly say it's integrations for dummies. It's pretty easy to kind of click and drag and make sure your integration's hardwired and where it needs to go. And it's designed to help you save a little bit of money on the implementation side of it, and also a little bit of headache on the implementation side of it. But what we do know is Data Bridge Pro is only available to those that are in the cloud right now. So if you were looking or having discussions about, obtaining Data Bridge Pro for your integrations, know that you have to be in the cloud in order for that to happen. Hexagon is currently working on a alternative solution for on-prem users. We do not know what that looks like yet. We don't know what that's going to be, or if it's going to be a Data Bridge Pro, light version, so to speak. So we'll stay tuned and we'll keep you guys up to date as soon as we know more. But you also may be asking asking yourself the same question, what does it take to get from my on-prem environment into the cloud? Well, your technical service provider can also assist with that transition. Digital Thinker does recommend on a best practice base that you need to get upgraded to 12.1 before we move you into the cloud for the absolutely most seamless transition possible into your cloud environment. So, moving on to the next phase here is just bringing us here to a close. We want to thank Victor for all of his knowledge and his expertise. He is the ION guru who is becoming even more of the Python guru, and hopefully Data Bridge Pro guru with us as well. So we thank him for his knowledge and everything else that he's brought to the table. If you have any questions or you want to learn more about what it's going to take to get you upgraded or to get Python Studio unlocked for you and talk about these future integrations, go ahead and give us a call or shoot us an email. Our email addresses are below. Pretty easy, alex.bolin@digitalthinker.com or victor.bott, B-O-T-T, at digitalthinker.com as well. You can also feel free to drop something in the chat for me if you want me to reach out to you individually. This webinar is being recorded and will be released on our YouTube channel here, hopefully by the end of the day. So with that being said, I'm going to transition us over to any questions. Who has any questions for us? So no, Data Bridge is not available for on-prem users right now. It is not available.
And truthfully, I don't think we ever expect it to be.
Yeah, I agree with Victor. I don't think they're going to release Data Bridge Pro for on-prem users at all. I think they're going to develop a secondary product for it.
Data Bridge Pro is interesting, though. I went to a week-long training down in Tucson for it. It really is, Hexagon's version of ION, right? It has a similar sort of GUI where you've got your individual blocks you can drag and drop, right? Kind of a coding for babies, as I like to call it. So it has that functionality and it's nice. As a technical side, guy, I prefer Python, but they're really trying to sell Data Bridge as the premier integrations, channel. But again, unfortunately, only available in the cloud.
Well, thank you everybody for being here today. Again, if you have any additional questions or something comes up to you later, don't hesitate to shoot us an email or shoot us a message. You can also find us, on digitalthinker.com, find our website. We, again, thank you for being here. Look forward to this being on YouTube here by the end of the day. And we hope everybody has a safe and fun Tuesday. Thank you again. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye.
Thanks.